Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. Now we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before, and this particular brewery brand is part of a larger kind of collective brewery which is very well respected. But I would say out of the three brands involved with this particular brewery, this is probably the one that's featured on the channel the least, but this brand is best known for their kind of lagers and IPAs and things like this, and their beers have been pretty solid in my experience over the last few years, and they have been improving quite a bit in recent times from what I've seen too. So yeah, the beer we're going to have a look at is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget. It is supposed to be very nice, and it's a style, as I say, that I know this brewery is pretty damn good with. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to Arlöv, which is a little bit to the southwest of me here in Lund, kind of about halfway along to Malmö, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Chad Beer, and these guys are of course part of the Molecule Brewing Collective. So this particular beer is Specimen 9. It comes in at 7.5% ABV, and this one is another IPA. So yeah, should be really quite nice. I guess we can call this one a New England Hazy IPA. But this beer was released as part of the Lokalt Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for March of 2023. And this is another one of the beers that I never had the chance to review because my phone died just before I went to Japan, and then obviously I was away for a long time. So yes, this is one that I have been waiting to have a look at for a wee while. But I just thought, you know, I haven't tried one of the Chad beers in quite a wee while, so this is it's a time to have a little look at one of these and see how they've improved. But yeah, a 7.5% New England Hazy IPA, this one. Let's crack on and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Chad Beer before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So yeah, just go into the homepage, put in your hometown, state, county, prefecture, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You will find one there for the Swedish playlist, and this beer will be in that, and you can check out the beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Chad Beer. So Chad Beer, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in the kind of Malmö area in Skåne in the south of Sweden, Arlöv to be specific, and the company was founded back in 2015 by the Australian Chad Payton along with his wife Lisa. So Chad had previously been a geochemist, and he was a long-term home brewer back in Australia, and he first encountered craft beer back in 2002 in Idaho in the US, and he began to experiment with brewing back at home in Melbourne when he returned to Australia. But apparently he also made his own malt for a period of time, but he decided that he was going to focus more on brewing beer. But he then got a research job in Copenhagen and lived on the Swedish side of the border. But originally Chad Beer were gypsy brewers, but then in 2015 they set up a 400-litre brewhouse in Svedala, just outside of Malmö, and the first beers were produced there in December of 2015. But in 2016 he brewed about 20,000 litres this way before he moved into the Lilla Ölfabriken brewery in Rosengård in Malmö. But in March of 2021 a new collective called Molecule was announced. This includes Elm 11 by Anders, Nerd Brewing by Hannes, and then Chad Beer of course as well. These guys have got a new brewery in Arlöv which starts off with a 1,500 litre brew kit, and they've been growing and growing ever since. So basically it's Anders from Elm 11 who basically brews all the beer these days, but the recipe design, I believe, the Nerd Brewing recipe design is still done by Hannes. He does take part in the brewing sometimes, and I think Chad is mainly managing sort of the kind of financial and business side of things when it comes to the brewery, but also kind of it being involved in the recipe design of Chad beer as well. So yeah, when it comes down to the Molecule Brewing Collective, basically Nerd Brewing are the imperial stouts and the big barley wines and all of these kind of things. Elm 11 is the kind of fruity, juicy sour beers, and then the Chad beer brand is now the lagers and IPAs and stuff like that. That's kind of how it goes with Molecule Brewing, but it's Anders, as I say, who is the main brewer and employed full-time by the company. But when it comes to the name Chad beer, it was basically first used as a working title for the brewery, and it was intended to be changed, but it's just really never been shaken off, and they've stuck with it. But as of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 40 different kinds of beer, and like I said, it is mainly the lagers and IPAs that you're going to see from these guys going forward. But yeah, that's everything we really need to say about Chad beer for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a look at the beer itself. So like I said to you at the start of the video, this one is a 7.5% New England Hazy IPA. You can see the artwork on this one is pretty nice. I'm not sure whether it's Anders from Elm 11 who's designing the artwork on these cans as well, because I know he does his own, but the Chad beer, I know the Chad beer labels, they do have a little bit of a this kind of similarity to them in some ways. But you can see gold top can, this one, 440 millilitres. If memory serves me correctly, I paid about 50 Swedish krona for this one, so that is about €5, £4.50 sterling, and that would be about, yeah, $5.50 American, something like that. But it tells you a little bit about the hops on the side with this one as well. So the bittering hop is Columbus, which we know very well, 12% alpha acid, big American one. It gives you this big kind of spicy floral aromaticity, and then it's hopped later on with Motueka, a New Zealand hop, about 8% alpha acid, big oily limey character from it, and then the dry hopping in this one is done with Citra and Nelson Sauvin. So Citra, American hop, 14% alpha acid, lovely in a New England hazy like this, big kind of juicy mango notes, quite a bit of lemon lime, and then Nelson Sauvin, a New Zealand hop, 16% alpha acid, a more kind of oily gooseberry type thing in this one. But yeah, this should be quite interesting. Like I say, my first beer from Chad beer in quite some time actually. So we'll get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. But yeah, let's do this. So when it comes to the Molecule Brewing Collective, when I think about it, I remember that Nerd Brewing, Hannes made an IPA a few years ago called Switch, a New England IPA, and it was absolutely lovely. It was like a really, really nicely done beer, this one. So yeah, the recipe that they had for that would be a very good basis for the Chad beers going forward, actually. Because essentially this brewery is these three guys who've come together to make their own company, and then they've kept their own three brands going. It's quite clever, actually. So yeah, the Switch that Nerd Brewing released a few years ago was an absolutely lovely New England IPA. I had to buy a can of that in Copenhagen, I remember, because it wasn't released in Sweden. But yeah, anyway, you can see this beer is poured pretty much exactly as you would expect of a New England hazy. So before the head disappears, you can see that this beer poured with somewhere between a quarter and a 1/3 head of a or 1/3 frothy white head, I would say. That has just faded away to be a kind of thin foamy layer now, but you've got that nice kind of thicker ring around the edge of the glass. Some medium-sized bubbles there, but foamy ones just sitting above that. I'll just let you guys have a little look at that, but I'm not sure how well the camera kind of zooms in on this one. But yeah, in any case, you've had a little look. But in terms of the colour of this beer, you can see like it's a lovely bright yellow, almost like a kind of mango juice. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But it does look really nice, as I say, a little bit of a ring around the edge, but just a very thin, wispy layer on top. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of your beer as well. But when it comes to New England IPAs, or any type of IPA for that matter, you don't often have to care about that, to be quite frank. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice, but not too much in the way of visible carbonation. So yeah, I would also point out as well, this beer is not the haziest of New England IPAs or hazy IPAs that I've come across. Remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, the wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. It can vary from brewery to brewery and even beer to beer. But yeah, certainly this is not the most. This is absolutely not the most hazy and soupy and gloopy of New England IPAs that you're going to come across. I think that is more than fair to say. Yeah, so I think that's everything we need to say about the aroma of this one, the appearance of this one. Let's go on and have a look at the aroma, I should say. So, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. So, as I've always said, for me, when it comes to IPAs, there are 6 elements to think about when it comes to the flavours of these beers. So you should think about the kind of farmhousey, grainy side of things, the farmhousey, yeasty side of things, sorry, the rye-lean and grainy side of it. These 2 elements are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs, but then you've also got barley malt bread, kind of oaty creaminess, wheaty bitiness, and then the kind of sweeter side of things as well. These are the main elements I think you should think about with these beers. So for me, this one, it's actually very barley malt bready leaning. It doesn't feel as if it's too heavy on the oats or too heavy on the wheat. And you get a little bit of the yeasty character out of this one too, actually. So yeah, interesting. As I say, I've not had one of these Chad beer beers in quite some time, but it smells as if it's going to be very kind of light and drinkable in some ways. But the other beers in the Specimen range, because I think the last one I reviewed was like Specimen 3, if I remember correctly. The last one I reviewed was about 8.5% or something like that. But the other thing we have to remember with this beer is that it is maybe, I think this is maybe about 2 months old at this point. And as I've said, New England IPAs tend to have a sweet spot, maybe about between 2 and 4 weeks old. This is when they're really kind of hitting their prime, because if you drink these too early, they just taste of green, to be honest. So yeah, that really is a bit of food for thought when it comes to these beers. But anyway, on the malty side of things with this one, let's just break the aroma down and describe it a bit more in depth. This beer, first off, it strikes me as quite bready and smooth. It's got a kind of a sort of mild oily green component to it and some nice oily fruity characters. But yeah, the way this goes together is really quite nice in that sense too. But yeah, let's just break it down. So the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. That goes together. So you can feel, yeah, that fresh white bready bread crust is in there. You also get a little bit of a woody character coming out of this one as well. So the woody character is a wee bit stronger in this one than I've had in some other IPAs, I have to say. But yeah, nice little bit of fresh white bready bread crust in there, a little bit of woody nature. Definitely a bit of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker character as well. Lots of kind of fresh and fluffy white bread for sure. Yeah, fresh fluffy white bread. The bread has a little bit of a sweet edge to it as well, which I think is quite interesting. And then, yeah, on top of that, it's on top of that, there's maybe a little touch of like a wholemeal brown bready character in there, but as I say, mainly fluffy white bread. And then on top of all of that, you've got a more kind of dense wheaty note out of this one. So yeah, the way that goes together is really, really nice as well. But then yeah, it's smooth, the kind of more dense wheaty character, lovely oaty creamy notes about that above there as well. And yeah, so yeah, lovely, as I say. The oaty notes in this one are quite interesting. As I've said many a time when it comes to New England IPAs, the oaty character in these beers is often an indicator of how fresh the beer is. So yeah, as I say, you've got this lovely oaty kind of creamy character to this one, and Essentially what happens with New England IPAs is that the older they get, the drier the oats get. So yeah, the more fresh and creamy the oats come across as being in the beer, the more fresh and creamy the oats are in the beer, the fresher the beer itself is. But yeah, the drier they are, the older the beer is. That's essentially what you should look for with these. Didn't say that in a very good way, but still, anyway. So for me, you've still got a lot of oaty creaminess in this one. So the beer holds up quite well, but you can smell some of the dryness of the oats starting to come through. But above all of that, you've got a little touch of a kind of Werther's Original type quality to this one. There's a little bit of McVitie's Digestive Biscuit in there as well. But yeah, for me overall, this is quite a big kind of white bready New England IPA. So yeah, I like this. I do like how this kind of pieces together for me actually. Yeah, I like that. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. On the, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of things with this beer. On the green component, it's quite interesting, this one. The green component isn't too pungent in this one. And as I've said many a time before, there are three kinds of hoppings you can use with IPAs. Early edition hopping, which usually takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness. Late edition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly flavour and aroma, if you like, but a little bit of bitterness. And then dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. This is completely flavour and aroma. So yeah, you've got all of that in there. When it comes to New England IPAs like this, they tend to rely on the latter two types of hopping, late edition and dry hopping, so that gives you mainly a brighter green component. But the West Coast IPAs use all three. The early edition hopping gives you more bitterness, and that tends to dominate in the aroma, so you get a very deep and dank green component there. But you can tell with this one, it's more, the green component in this beer has a little touch of earthiness to it. It's got quite a little bit of a bright floral aromaticity. I would have expected more spiciness out of it actually when Columbus is involved, and then you've got a nice kind of slightly zesty, grassy component out of the beer. But yeah, on top of that, the fruity character in this one for me is actually quite straightforward. You've got a little bit of mango in there, and that's going to be the citra and the dry hopping that's giving you that. But this beer really leans toward a more oily, limey character and a kind of gooseberry type note. So the gooseberry is going to come, that white green grapey gooseberry type thing is going to come from the Nelson Sauvin, and the more oily and zesty lime is going to come from the Motueka in this beer. But overall, the aroma in this one is very nice actually. It seems like it's going to be a very light, drinkable New England IPA. So as I always say, just take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think this could be very, very nice to try. So yeah, let's look at this then. This one is the Specimen 9, a 7.5% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Chad Beer, part of the Molecule Brewing Collective with Elm 11 Nerd Brewing in Arlöv here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, I have to say, that's quite nice actually. The aftertaste in this one is something that's just striking me on the first sip. The beer comes in and it's like very light and bready, and then all of a sudden you just get this punch of kind of more creamy oaty character coming out of it. Yeah, that really is interesting actually. As I said, when it comes to Molecule Brewing, I remember Anders years ago, Hannes years ago brewed that the Switch New England IPA in the cans, and that was beautiful. It was a big, thick, creamy, smooth thing, really nicely done New England IPA. I think that was the first one he ever released. But this beer is quite different to that. This one goes in a kind of different direction on the New England spectrum, and it works actually. These are this kind of reminds me of the other one we had, because I remember saying that the last New England IPA we had in the Chad Beer range, it was quite light and bready, but at the same time it gave you the juiciness you expect of the style. So when it comes to these Chad beer IPAs, they are a little bit lighter and more drier in a sense. They're not big, thick, creamy things. They're a little bit more, I think they rely a little bit more on the barley malt, but they give you a bit of the oaty creaminess, a bit of the wheaty smoothness and dryness, and then yeah, you've got the juicy fruits on top of that as well. So yeah, the way that it all goes together is really quite nice. This one, it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, you know, these Chad beers, they're pretty solid. They just strike me as being a little bit lighter and a little bit more sessionable. And I mean, having been in Australia, I know what the climate there can be like. So you can tell this is maybe what Chad himself would want to have. You know, a lighter, more drinkable, more sessionable IPA. And at 7.5%, this is kind of it's not the strongest one we've seen in the Specimen series, but it certainly is a little bit more drinkable. The other ones have been 8.5%, 9%, I think, if I remember correctly. But yeah, this is really nice. This one, yeah. Really solid IPA this. You can't really ask for much more when the market's almost saturated with these kind of beers. But let's break it down and just describe it a little bit more in depth. So the middle third of your palate that you have with this beer, the backbone of this one, for me, you've got that kind of fresh white bready bread crust coming out of the beer. So that forms the backbone of this one. On top of that, there is a little touch of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker and a wee bit of woodiness further forward. So you get Jacob's cream cracker, a more bit of Jacob's cream cracker above that, then a little bit of woodiness further forward. But then you actually get this kind of smooth, wholemeal, brown bready layer coming out of this beer, which is very, very nice. So yeah, the whole meal kind of above that kind of bready layer, you get a little bit of a kind of wholemeal and more dense brown bready type thing out of this one. So you can feel that dense wholemeal brown bready character sitting in there, and it's like a wet wholemeal brown bread, which is interesting. And then above that, you get this more airy and fluffy white bready character coming out of the beer, which I have to say I really do quite like. And then you can feel the more dense wheaty white bread sitting above that as well. So yeah, definitely a little bit more of a kind of dense white bready wheaty sort of thing sitting above this one. And then you can feel the oaty notes in this beer. I really think this one, it does really feel as if it's more barley malt leaning than oaty and wheaty, to be honest. But yeah, so down up on the smooth wheaty layer in there, above that you have you can feel the kind of oaty creaminess there. So in the middle of your palate, you've got this little circle there where you get the oaty creaminess coming out of the beer, and you can feel it's kind of concentrated. But as you move out toward the edges of that, kind of middle third of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of dryness out of this one. But I would say the creaminess in this beer, the oaty creaminess, has actually held up pretty well. But I do suspect again that is because of the makeup of the malt base in this beer. So yeah. The oaty, you've got a kind of dense oaty creaminess in the dead centre of the beer. Then as you go out further toward the edges of the palate in that middle third of your tongue, it gets a little bit drier and drier. And above that, there's a wee touch of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy character today, then a wee bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, the way that goes together is quite nice. Yeah, I do like that about this one. Actually, the malt base is quite interesting. It's quite different to other IPAs I've had in recent times, and that's where the complexity in this beer is in the malt base for me. Let's look at the back third of the palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate. You've got a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. It's a kind of mix of white and brown bread, I would say, but quite light and airy. Then on the back third of your palate, you've got that more, yeah, you do have that little bit of a more kind of wholemeal, white bready. You've got a bit of that more kind of bread crusty character in there. As I've always said, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate. So you've got a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there, and it feels a little bit drier. The cracker is above that, and that feels a little bit drier. But then you've got a more wholemeal, airy, brown bready type thing there, and that actually feels really nice. Then you've got the airy white bread above that, which is good, and then you can feel the kind of density of the more dense wheaty character there, a little bit of a wheaty bitiness, of course. So yeah, that's nice. And then above everything else, you've got the more kind of farmhousey, yeasty notes out of the beer, very light, woody, farmhousey bread, and a little bit of a kind of honeycomb character to it as well. So yeah, I do like how that goes together too. Yeah, for me, that is very, very nice. But you can definitely feel the back third of the palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together a little bit more. But let's look at the green component of this beer then. Back corners of the palate, definitely a little bit of earthiness, but that subsides very quickly and the beer becomes more kind of oily and floral. So yeah, lovely kind of oily floral character coming out of this one, but it's not overly spicy, and like I say, I would have expected a bit more out of this one in terms of big floral spiciness because of the involvement of Columbus. Columbus is, it can give you a hell of a punch actually, which I do like. So yeah, nice kind of big oily punch in there, a little bit of a kind of floral spiciness like I said, and then round the front curve of the palate it's a little bit lighter, more grassy, and a wee bit more of a kind of oily sort of thing coming out of it too. But yeah, the way it goes together is nice. The green component is more oily and slightly zesty in a sense. But then yeah, you have the front third of your palate in this beer as well, and that's where the fruitiness comes out. So let's look at that. The border region between the front third and middle third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a bready build up in there. Just a nice little mix of white bread and brown bread, but then you've got the base of the front third of your palate too, and you can feel that there's a little bit of the bread crust there, a smooth brown and white bready character above that. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the way that goes together is really, really nice. So the fruity side of things, it's interesting. It's kind of what I'd expect though from the 3 hops involved in this one that are going to be majorly involved in the flavour. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you do have a little bit of a more kind of passion fruity. We've got a little bit of a more kind of oily passion fruity quite note out of this one, and it's got a little bit of pungency to it. But as you move further forward, you start to get the mango, and as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a lovely dry apricot-y sort of thing in there, maybe a little touch of pineapple above that. And then when you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit more, you do have a little bit of a more kind of just oily nature to the beer. So you can feel the white, green, grapey, gooseberry notes from the Nelson Sauvin, but you can also feel the more oily lime from the Motueka. And as you reach the front curve of the palate's obviously got that more zesty, grassy note to it. You can feel the oily and zesty lime from the Motueka just kind of mixing in with that. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I have to say, is just really, really nice in that sense. The fruity side of this one is very well done. A mix of oily fruit and then a little bit of a juicy tropical note behind it. Yeah, it's a really interesting IPA, this one, mainly because it's quite different in its makeup from other stuff that we've had in recent times. But yeah, I think that's everything that we need to say about the flavour of this beer. So let's have a wee look at the let's have a little look at the the mouthfeel of this one just to round off. So, for me, this beer, it's quite, I would say that it's actually quite oily in its mouthfeel. I'd maybe go as far as saying that it's at the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth, big kind of thick, oily mouthfeel coming out of it. It does feel quite clean at the same time though. You have, and the bitterness in this one, I would say that's a kind of standard 30, maybe 40 IBUs. So sort of 30, 40 IBUs. For me, that's kind of standard for a New England IPA, but the malt base in this one, as I say, it feels like this is a more barley malt leaning malt base, so you've got that little bit of dryness in there, but the wheat is giving you a little bit of bitiness and a little bit of smoothness, and you've also got a little bit of a kind of oaty creaminess coming out of this beer as well. And there's just a little touch of sweetness to this one, as we mentioned earlier, but the fruity side of the beer, a little bit tropical, but mainly I think the more and more that I drink of this beer, it feels more oily. You know, it leans more toward the Motueka and the Nelson Sauvin, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, the way it goes together, I think, is very, very nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, very oily and kind of barley malt leaning New England IPA, this one. So the thing is with these Chad beers, I think these are quite different to what you get from a lot of the other Swedish breweries. It's a more barley malt leaning New England IPA for sure. But I like this, and maybe I need to pay more attention to the Chad beers actually. I think on the basis of this one, I think that's a fair statement to make. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Specimen 9, a 7.5% New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Chad Beer, part of the Molecule Brewing Collective with Elma Living and Air Brewing in Arlöv, just outside of Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Chad Beer as well, and we will see about returning to these guys at some point fairly soon. But until then, Slange it, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out Chad Beer's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Ciao just now.